Welcome to Find Your Center, the Weight Loss Surgery Show. Hey, it's Dr. Tuziant, and in this week's episode, we're going to talk about a sweeter topic. This week's topic is going to be the start of a two-part series on sugar. So, sugar isn't everything.
Sugar, oh honey, honey, you are my candy girl, and you got me wanting you.
As we now know, sugar is even in our music, and that song was from the band The Archies, which is a made-for-TV band that actually recorded a couple of songs for the TV cartoon on Saturday mornings called Archie and Jughead. It was a TV cartoon, but that song actually became a number one hit back in 1969. And a little trivia for you all is that is the only number one song in the U.S. that was never played live. Interesting. Anyway, sugar. Sugar is in everything. It's in 82% of the food products in the supermarket. It is added there for a reason. The reason why that sugar is added to our food is to have us like it more, crave it more, desire it more. In fact, there's even a term that's been coined for how much sugar a food should have, and that's called the bliss point. B-L-I-S-S, the bliss point. And that was actually designed by a Harvard graduate by the name of Howard Moskowitz, who was first hired by Pepsi, his consulting firm, to determine how much sugar should go in the soft drink Pepsi. And what he found is that people like sugar up to a certain point, and when food or drink becomes too sweet, they find it off-putting. The maximum point where folks actually find it most pleasurable, most desirable, without it being overly sweetened, is actually called the bliss point. He took this concept to many different companies. Campbell's Soup for one of them, which actually is the maker of the spaghetti sauce Prego. And he started adding sugar to those products as well. That caught on as Prego became very popular. And more companies came to him to find out how to add sugar to their food products. So none of this is by accident. None of this is for our benefit. Everything is designed for us to like it more, buy it more. However, sugar does have a negative impact on our body. Now, before we go any further, I'd like to say this. We do not need sugar to live. I'll repeat that. We do not need sugar to live or survive. Sugar is a commodity. More than 100 years ago, we didn't really have much sugar. Back in 1822, we would actually consume 10 grams of sugar every 5 days. So what does that really mean? That's about 2.5 teaspoons of sugar every 5 days. Now, at a bare bones minimum, we consume 10 grams of sugar at least every 7 hours. Some of us more, some a little bit less. An average can of soda, 12 ounces, typically will have a minimum of 10 grams of sugar, or 2.5 teaspoons, because again, it's 4 grams of sugar equals a teaspoon of that. And if you think about it, it's 1 teaspoon that we put into our cup of coffee is 4 grams of sugar. But as the soda industry, which is actually the biggest sort of consumer of sugar, began to grow, in 1899, they developed the mechanism to blow glass bottles, so now they can actually put their soda into nifty containers. In the 1920s, refrigerators became available, so soda vending machines started to pop up. A real important aspect in the world of sugar happened in the 1970s with the development of high fructose corn syrup. And now sugar became basically $0.00. It was dirt cheap. It was cheap to make, it was cheap to buy, it was cheap to add in. So again, we see an explosion in the amount of sugar that we're consuming by more than fivefold from the 1940s to the 2000s. And the primary responsibility of all this is from the sweetened beverage industry. In fact, back in the 1960s, the sugar industry would advertise to folks that if you ate sugar before your meal, you would eat less. It was almost like a dietary aid, and people bought it. Coca-Cola has been using Santa Claus to peddle their soda and sugar essentially since the 1930s. So he's like the number one spokesperson for sugar, and he is still out there today doing that. Now, there are three main types of monosaccharides, or basic sugars. They are glucose, fructose, and galactose, and everything really stems from that. Even our carbohydrates are just long chains of sugar. And the sort of the idea of a complex carbohydrate versus a simple carbohydrate is just how easily those sugars are broken apart or digested from that. But a lot of folks would think if it's sugar, it's one size fits all. Not true. Again, most of the sugar that we see, that table sugar, that white sugar, the stuff that we put into our coffee, the stuff that we will put into baking products or onto our cereal, is actually sucrose, which is a combination of glucose and fructose. And there's basically a 50-50 mix. High fructose corn syrup is more than 80% fructose. Now, why does all this matter? Well, quite simply, our bodies handle those two things quite differently. In fact, glucose can be used directly by our brains, our hearts, our kidneys, our lungs, our muscles if they are active. Keep that in mind. If we take in too much glucose, we turn it into fat. Fructose has no immediate direct use in our body. It has no choice but to be converted into fat. I'll repeat that. Fructose has no choice but to be immediately converted into fat. So be very careful about the difference between glucose and fructose. Foods that have high fructose corn syrup into them are going to make you fat, or more likely to put fat onto your body. Now, also be very careful about sugar, because there are more than 60 different names out there for sugar. Some of them are agave nectars, beet sugar, barley malt. There are things that are caramel, cane sugar, cane juice. So anything with the word cane in it is going to be a sugar. Anything with syrup in it is going to be a sugar. Dextran, dextamere, oat syrup, rice bran syrup. The list goes on and on and on. You have to be very careful about looking for these things when you're looking at food labels. And the other big tip here is that if there's anything listed as sugar, or one of its 60 different sub-varieties, as one of the first three ingredients in that product, be fully aware that more than 50% of that product is sugar. So next week we'll talk a little bit more about sugar. We'll talk a little bit more specifically about how glucose versus fructose is actually managed in our bodies, and how our metabolism handles that, and how we convert some to more immediate energy and some to immediate fat. Again, as always, thank you for listening. Have a nice day. Stay tuned for more podcasts from Find Your Center, the Weight Loss Surgery Show. Thanks for listening.